is Sjoerd De Jong, which is impossible in every country. My parents were not nice people, because no one manages this, not even where I come from. I'm originally Belgian, but I live in Holland, and that was difficult as well, because it's a Dutch name, but I am Belgian, so in Belgium they think I'm Dutch, and in Holland they hear my accent, so they think I'm Belgian, so I left, and I went to Sweden, so I've now been in Sweden for 10 years. I work as Evangelist for Epic, so I travel all over Europe to talk about the Unreal Engine. I've been using Unreal since 1999, so I'm at 18 years of Unreal Engine 1, 2, 3, and now 4. I started as level designer back in the days, and environment artist. I do tech art. I do anything in that direction. So I don't want to stand here and be like the salesperson saying you should use Unreal because I'm paid to say that you should use Unreal. Like, I've been using this for years. Okay. There's my Twitter, my email. I'll show this again at the end. So what I want to talk about is I want to highlight all the things that we've done in 2017 as a company so far. For that reason, it's called the State of Unreal. But by doing so, we can talk more about where the engine is heading as well, what kind of changes we're doing, what kind of projects we're doing internally and how that affects the engine, the games we're doing, which in turn affects the engine. Towards the end, I'm going to start highlighting some tools. I'm going to start bringing up my own game. If there's questions, we can easily discuss whatever you want to talk about. Okay. So it can be a mix of different things, but let's start with the absolute basics. So this is roughly what I just said. I've done AAA, indie, education, and freelance. I've done a bit of everything over all the years I've been doing this. Unreal obviously started with Unreal. In 1995, development started. 1998, it was released. And why this picture, it's a bit dark and projected, but why it's significant, I'll get back to in a bit. So we did Unreal Engine 1 around the late 90s. The dates are not super specific. You know, it's kind of discussable, like when is it released. Unreal Engine 2, 2002. Unreal Engine 3, 2006-ish. Unreal Engine 4 released at GDC 2014. A year later, it went free. So we're now, what is it, 3 years later, is it? Yeah, 3 years later. And then you might ask, why Unreal? And let me first ask you, who of you is already using Unreal a lot, like often? Okay, who of you is not using Unreal at all, or if you've never started it, or you're completely new to it? Okay. So I guess the rest opened it up and that's about it. Is that correct? Yeah, I guess. Cool. So you might ask, why Unreal, right? I think there's a lot of reasons, and I can't possibly show all of them. So I'm just going to take a few things that are, for me, important for me as a developer as well. One of the things that I like is that it has the same tools for everyone. And I've got the editor actually running in the background. There, I've got 2 editors running, so I'll just switch back and forth a few times, so it's not just slides. You know, it's just nice that you've got the whole tool interface, the whole editor, and it's the same for everyone. If you're a big AAA company with 400 people, or you're a one-person student, indie team, whatever, you've got the exact same stuff. We're not going to tell you have to pay more to get rid of a splash screen or something. Okay. It's the same tools for everyone. And we really like that, so that when you learn the engine, you learn the exact same tools that you can get a job with and use in a big company. Everyone has the same. The source is available for everyone, which we think it's really going to help you finish the games. And that's what we're all about. We want to make sure you can finish the game. If you wouldn't have the source available, then maybe you hit a bug in the engine, right? All the way at the end of production. And then what? You can email the company making the engine and then beg for them to fix it soon enough, which they probably won't. Even if they want to fix it, it probably takes them more time than you still have. So we have the source code available on GitHub for all platforms, for everyone. Even if you develop for like PlayStation, you can get the source code for the PlayStation build. It's not publicly available right away. You have to email us first because we have to see that you're a registered console developer, but you can get the access and you can fix anything you want. Or you can ask the community to fix it. You can get the source from the editor. You can make the editor purple and then submit the change back to us on GitHub and ask us to make that official. And we probably will not do that, but you could. And you could fix bugs yourself as well and submit them back to us, or make new features, like the community does in every release. It's every platform. I think the one that we skipped was Windows Phone, and I think we supported everything else, basically. It's primarily Windows, of course, Xbox, PlayStation 4, and mobile devices. That's where our strength lies. But it also runs on Linux, even the editor. We support server builds on Linux as well, all of that. We have the editor running on Mac. We got the VR editor running on Mac even, as you'll see in a few minutes. So we got that. Switch back to the editor. Sorry, wrong slide. What I really like about Unreal is that it has everything embedded. It has all these sub-editors embedded, so like the material editor, the particle editor, cutscene editors, all of those different tools, they're all there. So you don't need to fall back on plugins like certain other engines do. What they do has advantages as well. It's two different approaches, okay? So it has pros and cons. If you would have to fall back on a lot of plugins to build up your workflow, then you can build up your workflow the way you want to build it up, right? You can design your own workflow. But on the other hand, the problems you'll hit by doing that is that you're using a lot of different tools that look different, have different designs to it, they work differently, they probably don't work together, they might not work on every platform, they're probably not maintained, they're not documented necessarily, and so on. So because we built all the tools internally, it works out of the box. If you hire someone, they're used to the same tools, the same workflow, not some different combination of plugins or whatever. So why I wanted to open the editor here was just click through a couple of these things. Material editor, and you can see everything kind of looks the same as well, which is great. Blueprint, visual scripting, and they all, again, they look the same because they're done by the exact same people. Animation blueprints, as well, the skeleton here, the mesh, the other animation tools. Everything kind of looks the same, works the same. We've got, the UI editor as well, which has Blueprint integrated. You can see how it all fits together, and that I think is it's a really big plus for me especially. And the fact that I can do all of this, by the way, with lots of visual scripting. The game that I'll show you later on, I haven't touched a line of code. In fact, I can't program. I can't do code at all. But you give me this stuff, and I can make a whole game. And that says something. The fact, I didn't make a slide for this, by the way, but the whole Blueprint system in itself. And this is a super simple blueprint, but this system in itself, that's a major plus as well. How it empowers people who are not programmers to suddenly start getting creative and messing with things they couldn't mess with before. Price-wise, it's entirely free to use, including in education. There is no license management either, so you can just copy this stuff however you see fit. You just copy the directory from one computer to the next computer, it'll run. There's no license, there is nothing. It just runs. It's just the files. If you release the game, then there is a 5% royalty rate on it. That's it. That's the only real pricing there is. We think that's fair because, we feel that your production would go 5% faster because of all the stuff we're giving. At least 5%. Hopefully a lot more. And if you use it for non-game usage, then it's usually free. Okay, that means if you make like an architectural visualization of a building and you get paid by another company to make that building, it's still free. So as long as you don't sell it to the end consumer, basically, that's the rough guideline. There is some subtle things left and right, but that's the rough guideline. So, you make a museum game or something, it's free, anything like that. If you do need something else than the 5%, we can discuss everything. So just talk to us. The 5% is the starting, the starting point for smaller projects, especially if you're a very big company. It's probably not going to work, so we can discuss that. And we also have UDN, Unreal Developers Network, which is our professional support. So just to be aware, if you're new to Unreal, the public support stuff you have, like Answer Hub, that's not all the support we have. That's just what we have for the public. We don't guarantee support there either. Okay, but we have UDN. We're giving money away as well, because why not? So we have $5 million that we set aside, and we're giving that away. We're literally giving it away. You can apply. It's called the Unreal Dev Grants. And if you like what you're doing in Unreal, you can apply with anything that's Unreal based. We've given it to researchers, we've given it to educations, we've given it obviously to game developers, we've given it to companies doing something that's not games with it. Anything goes, anything cool. We like it, we give between $5,000 and $50,000 to that company or that person. Okay, so no strings attached. You could technically get the money and then go on vacation for the next 2 years, and we would not ask it back. We are not going to like you, but we're not going to ask it back. Okay, so there's no strings attached. You don't pay it back, and you don't have to do something after you got it. Otherwise, you get a penalty or something. It's nothing. Okay, we literally just give it. There's no end date either. It's ongoing. You can just apply whenever you're ready. You can also reapply whenever you feel you want to reapply. We're doing other initiatives as well. We're working with Exola now, and they've set up a capital, so they're working with funding as well. We've got a couple more of these things coming as well. So we're trying to really help people publish, build and publish their games. And for one, they need funding. So trying to partner up with other companies and ensure, you have a way of getting some funding going, or find publishers or anything like that. So I got that. But then in general, what do we want to do, right? If you start moving away more from all of the marketing talk and the sales points there, we want to basically do this. We want to be high-end focused. We want to have the best tools, the best performance, and the best graphics. It has to be quality. That's the overall thing. We want the best of the best. If you want to make something good and you need good tools, you use Unreal. That's the bottom line. And it doesn't matter what you use it for, but that's the bottom line. That's the message we're doing. That's what we're focusing on with everything we do. Okay, and that translates to a lot of different things. There's a certain other engine, starting with the letter U, and they always claim that they're the biggest engine. They say, we have so many millions of games or whatever it is. They have a huge number of games made with Unity. And that's totally true. They have way more games made with Unity than there are games made with Unreal. The thing is, though, if you start looking at the revenue, it's slightly different. So we just looked, this is not very scientifically done. We just did this very casual, okay? So don't start looking too deeply into the numbers. But we just looked in North America at the PlayStation Top 10 on May 31st, a month ago about. And we looked at the top 10 titles. And out of the top 10 titles, there were 6 Unreal Engine 4 games in there. And out of the other 4, I forgot what it was. I think there was 1 Unity game or something and 3 in-house engines or something like that. That was kind of the setup. And we've done this, we're doing this now all the time. We've done it, for example, for Steam. The top 15, 10 out of the top 15 are Unreal Engine. The remaining ones, from what I remember, were 2 Unity and 3 in-house engines. And if you start expanding that beyond the top 15, you start looking at the top 100 or so. That's the trend you're seeing. The bigger games, the games with higher quality usually, or the more serious games, or games that sell better, a lot of those are running on Unreal. So yeah, we have fewer games, but we've got these kind of games. E3 last year was this. This was all the Unreal Engine title at last year's E3. We're still compiling the list for this year. This was 80 titles about last year. And there's a few small games and student games in there, but most of these are big AAA titles, or at least AA or whatever you want to call it. Got a lot of big titles. This year we're at about 100, we think. About 100 titles this year. So it's ramping up. So we're still and traditionally we have been very strong in, the big titles and the big games. We're still very strong in there. In fact, it's going better and better than ever. We're seeing more and more in-house engines, especially in-house engines being converted to Unreal. That's what we're seeing. So then what I want to...
Say hello.
What I want to do is I want to show a couple of videos. They're all very long, so I'm just going to skip through every video I'm going to show you. Just click left and right so you get a quick impression, okay? I'll lower the volume a bit. One of the things that we're doing is obviously VR. I have a VR panel in about an hour, actually. VR-wise, sales-wise, it goes a bit slow, I think, for people making VR games and then selling them. It's obviously not going super fast, not making a lot of money, but we think VR is really important towards the future, where you're going to have augmented reality, you're going to have a blend at some point between VR and AR. So for the sake of the future and for the sake of pushing the technology as well, because you need to optimize this more, you need to start thinking about how you handle all the specific needs of VR. For that sake, we're really pushing VR. And as always with Epic, the best way of pushing that is not just to make the tools, but to make your own game. Because if you make your own game, then you understand the problems you have, and then you can change your tools to fit your problems, right, to solve it. So we made our own game together with Oculus and released it for free. So you can just download Robo Recall. In case you haven't seen it before. It kind of, this is basically it. Shoot robots, kill them in creative ways, whatever you can do. Straightforward game, very fun, very entertaining, but it gives us a way of testing how does Unreal work and hold up in actual use. Not in demos, but in full games. So that's one of the things we've done there. Another one is that we are now working with, we did this with Industrial Light and Magic. We did it together with Apple. This was announced about a week ago, where we basically took the VR editor, which we've been having for a while for Windows, but we got that running on the latest Macs. And they're doing VR on a Mac now as well. So we blended all of that together, including with working together with Industrial Light and Magic for Star Wars. So you see what we're doing there. All of this obviously works on Windows as well, as before. So you can just build it as you're in the world, because Lauren, my colleague, and it's very dark for you, unfortunately. See if we can find something brighter. She's standing there still, so you can really blend it together. So we're pushing it in those directions as well. Likewise, we are doing the same for the latest iOS devices are going to have augmented reality built in. So that's running on Unreal. He's filming the table, and the table is then rendered like that. That whole movie thing, because it's basically a small movie or cutscene, that's Unreal. It's early days still. There's no gameplay in it. But the fact that we're getting that to render, we're working directly with Apple and doing that. We are looking at AR. We haven't done HoloLens, for example, yet because we don't think it's ready. That's why we're a little bit hesitant towards that, and we don't think there's a market for it right now, but we know there is going to be one in the future, so we are definitely working on it. But again, if we do something, it has to be done well. Okay, so we're not just going to jump on, for example, HoloLens or anything that happens, just jump on top of it, because we have to make sure that if we do it, it needs to be done well. It needs to look good and perform well. Otherwise, no point trying. Kill sound. This is one of the mobile games we're doing, which is super not Unreal. I don't think this looks like Unreal at all. This is still Unreal. So we have 2 Unreal Engine mobile games in production ourselves. These are our own titles. To really see, again, how does Unreal hold up in mobile? I can talk about, we also have Spyjinx. There's nothing visible from, there's nothing been released from that, but that's the second title we have. And even though that what you just saw was a 2D game, it's not really our focus. What we really want to focus on is, again, high-end. So we want to have titles like Lineage. This is a Korean MMORPG on mobile. Basically looks like that. Your typical kill things that come in front of you with so many effects you can't see what you're doing anymore. But still, this is running on an iPad. And this was, and Android devices as well. And this was released in Korea first. And it made $180 million, I believe, if I remember correctly, in the first 30 days or so. In only Korea, I think. And I think it was only on Android, but I might be wrong. It's completely insane the scale this went at. And that's what we want to do, right? These kind of games, being able to render these kind of graphics, which for mobile we think are very nice, especially on the scale with so many players and things happening. That's what we're pushing for, high-end mobile games. We're obviously doing our own bigger games as well, as always. One of them being Paragon. So these are our bigger PC, PlayStation 4 games as well. That's going to be releasing this year. So we have this. And again, all of these things help us to test the engine. What happens if you actually build a game with this? Not just build tools, but actually build games, because that's what we're building the engine for. And features like this where the characters just got frozen, that got added back into Unreal. So you can do the same thing now with the Unreal Engine. Because whatever we build, we will transition into the engine ourselves. We're doing Unreal Tournament, and we're doing Fortnite. Especially Fortnite is going to ramp up to be quite a nice and big release, I think. It's releasing this summer in early access. So you have that too. So we're going to have 4 or 5. We have 5 games in production, and most of them are launching this year. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to Epic. And then we have indie games. These are not our games, but obviously Ark is big. Astroneer is doing quite well too. Astroneer were just 8 people, and they sold 750,000 copies about so far, with just 8 people. I think they're still early access as well, but I'm not sure on that. And Ark, I don't know, 6-7 million, whatever it is by now. It's a huge number of copies. They're just basically indie titles. And people always think, Unreal is really cool, works very well for like AAA games, but we can't handle that. Our team is too small, or our budget is too small. I mean, we can't use Unreal, it's just too big for us. And we want to get away from that. If those people can build that with 8 people, and I will show you my own game, which I've done with 8 people as well. The fact that we have all those tools built in allows you to actually build big games. So you want to get away from that perception Unreal is too complicated. It's not. So this is my own game. Let's go through it a bit as well. Not much gameplay here that I'm showing in this video, but that's the idea. So you have an entire alien planet, fully dynamic day and night system. All of this happens in real time, could happen at any random point. A meteorite could actually hit you as you're running around if you're unlucky. All of it works. It's like 12, 16 hours of single-player gameplay, story-based, everything. We've done this with 8 people and almost no budget at all, while I was traveling and doing everything else for what I do for Epic. Okay, so this is not an Epic title, it's my personal project. But again, the fact that you can do this is crazy. The fact that I can build all of this without touching a line of code, I can't even program. That says something. And I'll show you more of the game in the editor itself, so you see a little bit how I build it later. We do other stuff to support indie games too. We have actually, 10 or so indie games downstairs. There we help them get here, so you have the little corner there in the back. GDC, every year we bring about 10 games there too. When it comes to GDC especially, we will pay people's plane tickets, hotels, we pay the whole thing. We just literally bring them there and let them show their games. So we'll help them. The thing is that we don't earn anything on the games unless the games actually sell, because we take 5%. So unless there is something, the 5% is worth nothing, obviously. So we need to help, we need to make sure you can ship. The engine has to be good enough to let you ship, no bugs blocking you, etc. We need to make sure we can help you sell the game and promote the game and so on. Because that's part of that setup. We're moving into modding as well to allow people to mod the games. So right now we've got, Untitled Tournament, Robo Recall, Conan, what you see here, Ark, Squad. I think that's it unless I forgot one. So you have about 6 or so, 5, 6 games available for modding. So you can do that as well. If you're an indie company, you can actually work with us and allow modding of your game through the editor itself. So you can distribute the whole editor and engine as part of your game, and we can add it to the launcher and so on. If you're learning the engine though, it's really nice to just, for example, download Conan and look at how they made it, because you can look at their levels and their content and just mess around and play around with it. And then we do this every single month. It's basically, as you see, Unreal community projects. These are just smaller projects from students or individuals, hobbyists, small indie companies, anything like that. So every month we collect the coolest stuff. But you can kind of see, what the community is building. And again, these are unfunded projects usually, and very small teams, and how far people get, and what kind of visuals they can accomplish with on their own or with just a few people. So again, that's what we're pushing for. And then we have this. So when we start moving out of games, we see a lot of growth possible outside games. We think that the technology is now getting mature enough to be able to be used in, for example, film or the car industry or anything outside regular games. And we think that's going to continue. And you can clearly see it continue because, if you look at the quality real-time renders are doing and you look at how slow normal renders are like V-Ray, that takes years. And obviously the quality that they do is still better than what we have with real-time renderers. But if you look in 5 years from now or 10 years from now, it's going to shift more and more towards real-time renderers. And we're in the perfect position to make use of that. So we have opened an office in Montreal and hired people across all of our other offices. And we are focusing on enterprise, which means everything non-games, right? Visualizations, training applications, marketing videos for selling buildings or cars or something like that, configurators, things like that. So we're working with a lot of big companies. I can't show you the logos just yet. We're still very early on with a lot of this. But most of the car manufacturers in the world are now working with us. A lot of other big companies like IKEA are working with us. So it's going really well there. There's huge growth possible. And I think that's going to be a very interesting combination. That, for us, translates into, for example, projects like these, where this is Star Wars, obviously, and we have the robot here is rendered in Unreal in the movie itself. So part of the movie was rendered in Unreal, in real time, and used in the actual movie. That's crazy. And the fact that we can do this with these kind of companies, with Hollywood itself, who are very demanding, and we can render that guy in Unreal. They adjusted the renderer a bit, so this is not the default Unreal rendering, but still, it's real-time rendered. And it's only 30 seconds, so in itself, it's not significant for the movie. But it's the first step, the fact that they took that first step and started using Unreal at this serious level and actually kept on using it and didn't re-render it. That's crazy. So give this 5 years, you see what happens. And that really impacts the games, because we have to start doing all kinds of other things, for example, this. This is something that we did a few months ago, where we have this dummy car, or whatever you want to call it, which has sensors on it. It's basically motion tracking on the entire car, and it captures the reflections of the world, and it captures a lot of data, and we then use that in real time to replace the car with a 3D model of the car of choice rendered in Unreal as you're filming it. So the quality is not always super photorealistic. It doesn't have to be just yet. That would be the next step. But for example, for a movie director, what you see here, they're driving in the car next to it. And the problem for movie directors is that everything is green screen nowadays. So they have no idea what they're directing. They see just weird people in green costumes standing in front of screens. But if they would be able to look at the screen and see what it would actually look like, even if it doesn't look perfect yet, but actually in real time translate what it would be on the screen, then they can see how the actual car would look and not that dummy car. And they can see how the actual characters would look. So that's what we've done there. And again, it's a progression. It's going to take more time to do this, to take this really to the next level. But the fact that we're doing this, and with these kind of big companies who have such a high demands, that really says something, and that forces us to push the graphics and the tools in Unreal itself as well. Because we don't just need tools anymore. We need tools that work for the most demanding customers on the planet, like Hollywood and all that. We need the best possible graphics. That really impacts how the engine is going to move forward and the tools available towards the developers as well. For example, you got Sequencer, which we added, a year and a half ago, I think, a year-ish, which is our new cinematic tool. We had a cinematic tool before that, but we replaced it entirely with this one. And this one can, for example, directly export back to Maya, including animations and cameras, and export back and forth. It allows you to green screen things. It allows you to do all kinds of different things. Embed media is very, very powerful. It's built up according to the rules of the industry, so according to other comparable tools to make sure it's consistent, so make sure that people can easily get into it if they're used to other similar tools from outside the games industry, and so on. That's one of the things we've added. We're adding more stuff there. The audio tools were quite bad, to be honest, for quite a lot of years. We've always done everything with our own audio tools. So it's not that you couldn't make a game with it. It's just that people wanted to do more than just make a game with it. So we started rewriting it, and we're not done yet. But one of the things we're releasing, it's somewhat public. You can play with this, but you have to enable it as alpha feature somewhere, command line. But we're adding all of this. We're a built-in synthesizer and everything. And we're going to take the next step. And in fact, that goes in general for everything here. If we go back to the editor. If you look at the particle editor, let's find a particle somewhere. This is the particle editor that we've had for years. We've had this since 2006 already. This is how it works. We don't think this is good enough anymore. So we're way past the point already where we're just building tools, and the tools allow you to do something. We don't think this is good enough. So we're rewriting the entire particle editor, and we're going to make it node-based, also drawing lines and so on. And that's going to allow for more you can customize it better. You can do mathematical calculations better, or whatever you want to do. Customize the effects all the way. And it's going to render faster as well. So you can do even more. So again, that's the thing. And the same goes for tools like the material editor. Let's take something, random material here. Yes, it has nodes, and yes, you can draw lines. And yes, if you use, for example, Unity, there's other tools where you can draw lines. But this is not about drawing lines anymore. That goes for most of our tools. On the surface, they might look similar, it's a node-based tool. But the level of depth that we've managed to add in here over the years far surpasses what we think every other tool out there. We've had this too since 2006. So it's been 11 years. In 11 years, you can improve this quite a bit, and we have, with additional features, a lot of small little workflow thingies as well, to make it as easy and as good as you can possibly get it. And it goes in general, the quality of the tools, that's what we want to have. If you just look at the scene here for a second, the fact that very small things, right? And they're very, very simple, but the fact that I can move this window here without using the three arrows there, I can just use shortcuts to move it, because that allows me to, for example, bind the camera to it and drag it, and I can see exactly how it lines up with, say, the wall here. And small stuff, but it's going to speed up, because if you would have done this by this would have been difficult, because now I can't hit the red arrow, which is kind of underneath. I mean, you can see this doesn't work. Small stuff. The fact that I can just Control-C this and Control-V this to Notepad and this text, and I can copy-paste to each other. It's all the very small stuff, but it's the level of redefinement we're going for. And that makes a difference. This has to be shippable. This has to work in production, not just in demos. This has to work whether you're 4 people or 400 people. It has to work. I think I hit mostly the end here. Then I basically said this. So Niagara is a new node-based FX tool. Other stuff we're doing is in geometry tools. We're going to allow for modeling in the editor. We kind of already do that, but the tools are very old. They're from literally the 90s, almost, with some fixes on it. But we're going to allow for proper modeling in the editor. It's not meant for replacing Maya or something, because that would be pointless. But it's meant for allowing you to make quick fixes to models, or fill a hole somewhere, or small, make like prototype geometry, something like that. So that's coming too. Let me switch to my own game. So we have this. So this is one of the levels we have in my game. The game has about 12 or so of these levels. So you can see it's pretty big. You can see it runs perfectly fine, even though I'm not loading much, and it's pretty detailed in what we have. Obviously my laptop is not that weak, but I mean, you can see the performance here is perfectly fine while running another editor here. Doesn't do anything. I can open up some of the blueprints and you will get very scared. So don't get scared. Let me open up the most important ones. And they basically look like spaghetti. Because you might say, well, visual scripting, A, you will get spaghetti. B, it's not real programming. And C, it probably doesn't work on a big scale. It probably just breaks after a while. I mean, it probably works for small demos, but you can't actually build a game with this, right? That's crazy. I did that. And it still works. And I built spaghetti, which is my fault. But it still works. So the fact that you can build spaghetti and it still works, that says something about the engine, I think. I'm just opening a few of the important ones here. 1 second. So I can show you. Okay, so here's the... So Blueprint has both, it's kind of like a prefab, I guess. It has both meshes in there and the scripting. I'm trying to zoom in on something here. So here's the sky, which is very difficult to see because it's so big. But basically the entire sky is one script, and it has all the clouds and the planets drifting around, right? But here's the actual script attached to it, which is this, which got a bit out of hand, as you can see. A lot of this is, you can make your own blocks, so you can easily, if you double click that, so you get more blocks. You can easily compress these yourself in blocks. You can also make your own blocks in C++, by the way. So extending this is easy. But you see the scale of it at which it goes. This is the player itself. So this is the player pawn. And it grows out of hand, because sometimes you're like, I should have probably made a variable, but I kind of just pulled the line there. Like, it grows over time, it grows out of hand, as you can guess. But this is my fault, right? I could have done this cleaner, but I'm the only one who worked on this. So no one had to understand this except me. So I didn't care. Plus, I started on this with an early version of Unreal, and we didn't have all the features in place yet. So I had to work with a reduced feature set as well. Nowadays, you would have been able to do this in several other ways. But the fact you can have this much, and again, a lot of it is just is actually collapsed, right? For example, I click on this, and that's actually that. So it's a lot bigger than what you're seeing. This is the player controller, which handles the controls. So all of this is the core of the game. All of this is running basically roughly at the same time. I mean, here's jump, which got extreme. You can make jump in Unreal with 2 blocks. Key event, something is pressed, jump, function jump. That's it, it's built in. But I hit some exceptions, because what happens if you jump on a ladder? What happens if you swim and you jump? What happens if you jump while in VR? What happens if you're in VR on a ladder and you jump, but you turned off the joystick controls on the motion controllers in a Vive? Like, you start building up exceptions. So it got a bit big. This is a little pocket computer you're holding, which is basically that. You start seeing the scale. This one is fun as well. This is the item you hold and pick up. So this is basically the standard interactive object. That's all of this, for many exceptions. You can see here, this is when you combine items, basic crafting, this is grabbing, and so on. We have about 100 of these per level. So we're executing 100 times this per level. That takes me 1.3 milliseconds on the computer I tested it at. So, it could be lighter. That's the next thing that people say. Yes, Blueprint is fun, but it's slow. You can't actually use this. It's slower than C++, obviously. It's always going to be. But often that's not really a problem. It kind of depends on what you do. I did take some precautions here, but for most things, they're not actually running frame by frame, right? They're just an event. For example, I drop the item. It's only going to execute this once the moment it drops the item. You're not going to gain much performance from moving that to C++, probably. Often, I have a single-player game here too. I'm not going to hit much performance issues with doing this. If you would have a strategy game with millions of soldiers running around, and they're all blueprints, yeah, it might die. Okay, but it really depends on what you're doing with it. The system in itself is not that slow. It's slower, but it's far from slow. It's in fact the same speed as Unreal Script in Unreal Engine 1, 2, and 3. And that was used for everything, almost. For a lot of things. So you can go very far with this. You can make very big things, and it'll still work. You can make spaghetti, you can make long lines, and it'll still work. So since that will work, you can definitely do this cleaner, and it's definitely going to work. So that's the cool part. Can highlight some other things. Can change the time of day easily. So we have all kinds of tricks with dynamic shadows as well, using distant field shadowing to ensure we get efficient long-range shadows. I can visualize that. We're actually using this for shadowing, which is a distant field representation of the models. You can see it's very imprecise. The tree doesn't work very well at all. But if you are in, if you look at the shadows here, you don't really notice that. See, because you get quite a long dynamic shadow range. It's going to fade about now. See? But it renders a lot faster by using that instead of the other ones. We have a lot of those kind of features built in as well. So a lot of fun stuff. You can build really large worlds as well. As you can see, this is about 5,000 objects, but I've got levels which is 10,000 objects, and it still runs perfectly fine. It's built for scale. Goes for the content browser as well. Everything is built for scale. What I have here right now is 10,000 assets, materials, sounds, particles, textures, anything. These are all the assets of the game. It's 10,000 of them. Still works perfectly fine. You could have 20, 30,000, still works just fine. Everything is built for scale. And I think that's really nice. This built-in source control. You can do source control here. I don't have a server to connect to, but you could connect to it. Built-in Git, although we don't prefer Git. The Git plugin and support is beta. We don't use it internally. SVN as a preference, or definitely Perforce. We use Perforce internally, and that works pretty good. I use it for this project as well. If you connect to it, then you can just check out files. There would be a source control option here with a menu, and it just says check out or submit files. And it just works. There's no meta files, there's nothing else. It's just the asset. Everything here is one asset file in Windows. That's it. You send that one asset file to someone else, you just duplicate it with the same name, it'll just run. Preferably place it in the same folder as well, because it remembers the whole folder path. So the game was released in July or June and July, PC and Xbox, last year. So it's been out for a year. We sold about 150,000 copies now, which for the team size was very good, we think, and for the amount of money we spent on marketing. So it was a nice success, worked great. We went through 17 engine upgrades doing this. About 17 engine upgrades, still survived. We started working on this when the engine wasn't even public yet. So it was definitely not very stable back then, and it went through all of the upgrades, and it still lives. And sure, there were bugs, and there were issues left and right, and there were frustrating moments where, why doesn't this work anymore, or why is this now broken? There were issues. But the content survived as well. And whatever features we used, like cutscene tools and all that, even when they got replaced by us with newer tools, we will never remove the old one, because otherwise it's going to break, at least not for the first year or longer. And I can show you one other cool thing here. Or releases. Here it opens. So we have a new engine coming out, a new engine release about every, and I'm in Yahoo for some reason, which is useless because I couldn't even find this. Let's do this again. Let's Google on Yahoo. And then search again. After a long time. Every 3 months we have a new engine release, roughly. So the next one is scheduled for the beginning of August, from what I remember, if I remember right. We're now at 4.16, great. I hope this works. We're at 460 now, so we had 16 releases since 3 years ago. So you can calculate the average. But every time we do this, we have a huge change list. Okay. So this is the 416 release. And you can see just how much we're doing and how fast the engine is evolving. And it has been this fast. You can look through all the previous releases. But it has been this fast since the very beginning. I'll let it load the pictures. I think it has quite a lot. So this is one release, just one release. And you can scroll through. And it tells a picture if you do that. Because all the pictures are basically new major features. Everything that we just fixed, we're going to get a long list of just fixes in a second. You can see how long. Can you see here? These are all just smaller changes we're doing. Bullet point per bullet point, no matter how far you go, you can see. So we are communicating every single change. So you know exactly what has happened, and we're fixing as much as we can, within the time we have. So we're fixing and improving a lot. We're adding new features, new workflow improvements. For example, just randomly picking into something. One of these things was not editable outside code, I assume, from this. So we made sure that is now. Just changing everywhere through. You can see in the scroll bar on the right, if you can see it, I'm like 60% into the length of the page now. That's what we do in 3 months. And we're doing this every single 3 months. So that's how fast we're moving. So yeah, I can scroll a bit. I can take this. That's one release. That's the speed at which we're moving with this. That's how fast this is evolving. Do you have any questions or any requests that things you want to look at here or want me to explain or questions about the engine in general?